welcome back to our Ellipse Unsealed podcast. Today we have with us Anthony Rucker. Before I want to get into it, though, I'd like to point out that this is our 20th podcast episode.
Wow. I was trying to keep track, and I thought I had tracked that, but that's awesome.
Yeah. So, Anthony, you're on a very special podcast today, I guess.
I'm feeling special already.
Yeah. So, do you want to start us off by kind of telling us a little bit about yourself?
That's always a trick question. I was born in Tennessee. It's like, how far do I go back? And I think I'll just go back to probably what in the topic and who I am is relevant. From where I work and stuff is supply chain. I started that actually when I got out of the Navy. I was in the Navy for 4 years, went from like 18 to 22. And actually probably doing supply chain in the Navy. The last couple of years, I was actually in a position to where I was ordering a lot of the materials for the ship. So, the tooling, the ropes, even down to the toilet paper, but making sure that the ship, that I was on, we had a crew of 400. We hauled a battalion of Marines, something like 1,000 Marines when we had them. And so I had to make sure we had certain supplies and things that we used to maintain the ship. So even though I didn't realize I was doing supply chain, I think I was then. And once I got out,
they were using Microsoft Dynamics. I'm sure of it.
Yeah, I don't think it was Microsoft Dynamics then. So I don't even think Exapta existed. So I am a little long in the tooth, Bobby. But after I got out of the Navy, I would just, sometimes, there's folks that when they're little, they say, hey, I want to be a fireman when I grow up. For me, it just kind of, I fell into jobs after I got out of the Navy. And the first one was like a scheduler for this manufacturing company. And most of it was, paper based. We had some green screens, but I started doing scheduling, and then I went into planning, and then I became a production control manager, not at the same company. I went for different companies and trying to get some experience when I was young. But I was an operations manager, a materials manager. I was a warehouse and distribution manager. And even, right before I started doing pre-sales and solution consulting, I was a business systems manager and actually, working for a CIO. And we did an implementation at that company of the warehouse management and transportation system. And I just really, liked, and was admired those solution consultants and those pre-sales people that came into the business. And I go, I want to be that kind of person. I'd like to be a person that helps companies, learn more, about software and be able to, see them start using it and getting the benefits out of it. So I started doing supply chain consulting and worked for a couple of partners, then worked at Oracle for a few years. I've been at Microsoft now as for 10 years as a pre-sales consultant or solutions consultant, or, we call it a technical specialist. But, basically doing that for the past 24 years. And it's been great because, it's kind of like that cable job. How's that made? I get to go out to companies and see, how they manufacture, how they do distribution, how they go to market, seeing how they're using maybe their existing software, or if they have Dynamics, getting to see how they use Dynamics. So it's fun to, go out there and help companies, get better, improve, and optimize, if you will, with software. And in the middle of all that, I got my MBA at the University of California, Irvine. And that even really helped me, get a bigger picture and understanding not just the operational needs of a company, but really understanding, what are those traits or characteristics of companies that are successful and do well. And again, I lean on that, and I use all those years of experience and education to be able to help customers today.
I put an exclamation point on that sentiment. I mean, one of my favorite things about being a business analyst at my end user, or even at Ellipse when I started, was taking people's input and helping them find a solution, whether it was already in the system because you can recognize what the need, and then you're just like, oh yeah, we can do that in the system. Let me show you how to do it. Yeah. It's a process change. It's just a slight difference in the way you're doing things now, or we can find an ISV or build a custom solution, because I was developing an AX and 3.0, 9 and 12. I can develop a solution for us that meets your needs. So I really love that point. as well as you made me think about just seeing various different operations. When I started at Ellipse, one of my favorite things was actually to get in with the different, because I just had one organization before, it was end user, and I was there 20 years, so I knew that industry really well. But getting to move to Ellipse, I got to see other industries, and one of my favorite, it was during the pandemic, but I got to do a visual tour of a tile company called Ludovici. They make custom Italian ceramic tiles for homes as well as industrial. So, but he walked, because we were going through some supply chain issues they had. So he walked me through with his cameras all the steps they do to go through to make these tiles, from the initial mold to the baking to the drying to the and kind of walk through the pieces and parts to kind of help them out with their project-based operation. So helping them out, to figure out how to best use the system software. I just love seeing, that was, another cool aspect of working, like you said, at this next level where you get to see every bit of, what people are doing out there with the software.
Yeah, I like going across the industry too. I think that's very exciting, instead of just being in life sciences or just being in, a certain industry group, because you get to see different things. And sometimes you might be in an industrial manufacturer and they're have a problem, and you've been in a life science company and seen how they solved it. And you can, use that knowledge and what they did and maybe implement something like that even outside of that industry. But I've seen Edwards Life Sciences make a heart valve. I've seen NKG make spark plugs. I've seen them been to a lot of food and beverage companies, a lot of wineries when I was with Oracle, but I've seen them make bacon. I've seen them make hot dogs, so.
Don't talk about that. You don't talk about
Yeah, the hot dog story, it's like that old saying, once you see how they make hot dogs, you will like
you
hot
don't
dogs.
want to know. Yeah. Just, if you like them, eat them. That's it.
Right.
So when I saw you last, we were talking about AI, and we kind of wanted to focus a little bit about that. I know you were really passionate about it, in our local meeting a couple months back. Do you want to talk a little bit about why it's important? I mean, I'm a huge, we talked about, some of the nature of why it's important to start adopting AI now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like we talked about in that user group session is, do you think IA is a little bit scary? And I think I said in that session, I think it's scary when I think of it at the global level, and we'll touch on that maybe a little bit later. But at the world level, when you think about government, defense, social media, it's a little bit scary, with AI. But when I think about it in business, for finance, for operations, of course, supply chain, it's a lot less scary, because the footprint is smaller. You're more at that micro level, if you will, and you can kind of, manage the data that you're using to make decisions. So the focus is a little bit more defined, and the goal really is to do the things that we've always been trying to do with software since I started as a scheduler, straight out of the Navy many, many years ago, is try to improve business outcomes. Things
Mm-hmm.
like enhancing decision making, boosting productivity, driving agility, fueling innovation, discovering insights, extending brands, automating tasks. And really, one of the big ones, and we see it in the latest release of Dynamics, is providing access to needed data in a quick way. There's ways that we can get to the information, and customers sometimes complain about, well, there's too many clicks, and again, this is more modern software. Used to be no clicks, in the old days,
Right.
then there was function keys. Now there's clicks, and even when you can click, 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 people are still like, I don't want to have that many clicks to get to the data. And I think the beautiful thing about AI and why it's important is the speed of which that data can be brought to you, the speed of that information, to really help you make better decisions. Because a lot of times we think, oh, maybe this supplier can do it, or oh, I have enough capacity here, or oh, I have enough parts here. but we don't know. And, it takes a little time to be able to go through the software, do your clicks and say, yes, I can really achieve this, or yes, this is really a time to, launch this marketing program with a specific customer in a market. It takes some time to do that research, and being able just to ask a question, using that natural language processing and just say, hey, I just want to know, do I have enough, capacity and labor and parts to build, 1,000 of these units, in the next week. That quick access to information should, and I'll say should because, there is the human factor, should, help you make decisions faster and better, and quicker, of course.
Yeah. When I was in IT, in the development world, or even in the in that next level, we were a small department, so I wore many hats. And a lot of the reporting requests were really, people say, oh, you're always writing reports, but they weren't really reports. They were data polls. Can you tell me how many, like you said, how many items we have left to sell? Can you tell me what Anthony sold last month in Ohio? And like your point you made was the perfect one, the natural language ability. Because even the times where I was doing those, SSRS had self-service portals. You could go up and, if you were a astute enough end user, you could create your own quick report in an Excel export or whatever. But it required some ability to jump into the technical side of it, and the natural language side of it just kind of clears that. If I can just talk to the system and say, hey, can you tell me how much Anthony Rucker sold last month in the state of California? And sure, I can. Boop, bop, beep. It spits the numbers out for me real pretty, and I'm done. And I don't have to involve IT or any other resource to do that.
That's a great example. I remember in the olden days, when we would run, the planning reports to get the output of MRP, the report would be this thick, and the planner would start going through it. And I remember this one company, it wasn't sorted, it was maybe sorted by, part number or something. But they would start going through, and maybe they were looking at an A item, maybe they were looking at a P item, maybe they were looking at a C item. And my philosophy was, if you don't control your A items, who really cares about the B and C?
Right.
Because that old 80/20 rule,
Yep.
80% of your volume or your activity is going to be on 20% of the items, and those are going to be A items. So I immediately had them sort that report by the ABC classification, because I wanted those planners to go through the A items and make sure that all the needs and requirements were there. But today with AI, it does all that heavy lifting. It looks at all that data in that big, thick report, and it tells you what's most important, and it tells you the action you need to take. That's one of the beautiful features in Copilot, and we'll talk about it later, of being able to look at the purchase orders that maybe vendors are trying to make changes to. Well, it does all that pegging and looking in the background, that heavy lifting, that looking through the report or clicking through the software to do your pegging. It does it all for you. And so again, just that quicker, faster, access to information. That to me is what's exciting, about AI. Chat GBT, you get excited about that, and I think it was something good for people to see, what's possible with AI. But it really depends on the data it's looking at. And that's why I say at the world level, I get a little overwhelmed. But at a business level, as long as it's looking at your business data, then you kind of know or trust that that data is clean. And that's something that's important. I started that session that we did a couple months ago in the user group with saying maintain your data, because data is important, because AI only knows what it has access to. And if it's looking at bad capacity information or bad lead time information or incorrect information in your business data, well, then it's not going to give you back a great answer. So something that we've been saying for years with companies is maintain your data in your system. I used to say that when you look at that computer, you should be looking at exactly what's in your warehouse or exactly what the manufacturing floor looks like, because you can always tell at a company if they don't trust their data. If they go, well, I got to build this or I got to ship this to the customer, I want to have a guy go out there and count and make sure we have the inventory.
Yeah.
Well, that right there tells you that you're not even maintaining your system well enough to even trust the inventory. And if you don't trust the inventory, ask an AI a question of how much you have, and you're not keeping that accurate, well, then your answer coming back is not going to be so great. So,
Yeah.
AI doesn't save us from having to make sure that we have clean, good, maintained data in our business.
And more companies are understanding that this really data is your number one asset at the end of the day. It's not the inventory. I mean, inventory might have more dollar value, like noticeably, like physically on it. Hey, I've got $2 million worth of inventory, but data is like an exponential value and revenue to your business at this stage and where we are in the world.
Yeah, I don't know who does that commercial, but Matthew McConaughey's in this commercial where he walks into this Western town. You may have seen it, and he says, "If AI is the new frontier, then does that mean data, is the new gold?" And I like
Yeah,
that line. I don't know if I necessarily like Matthew McConaughey, or I don't know, I can't remember exactly who is, who's doing that ad. I don't know who it was or what
yeah,
company, but I kind of like that analogy because
yeah.
I
That's a
agree.
great analogy, actually. Yeah,
Yeah, it
really,
is new
really well put.
frontier, and data is the new gold.
Yeah, got to get our miner hats and our pickaxes and get going on that.
Yeah, stop mining data. We already use that phrase, mining data. We're mining
Yeah,
data.
we've already got the phrase built in.
One of the components of AI is knowledge mining, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Very true. So you kind of talked about how at the, you trust the business level a little more, but globally it's kind of, I don't know. But how do you feel about AI, how AI governance is being handled?
That was one where, it's funny, Savannah, we were talking a little bit before, how
Mhm.
that's one where you got to do a little research, because even though Microsoft is definitely in that playing field, OpenAI AI is definitely in that playing field. We don't think about it sometimes at the business level. But when we start thinking about, that global level, first, Microsoft is committed to, the advancement of AI driven by ethical principles, whether it's at a global level or a micro level.
Yeah.
But, there was a lot of craziness at the end of last year between Microsoft and OpenAI. So there was the whole CEO of OpenAI leaving OpenAI and then coming to Microsoft, and he was supposed to head up the AI program at Microsoft, and then he went back, to OpenAI, and had a new board, and so that was kind of a little bit of craziness. And what's going on right now? I mean, this week in Davos, or the World Economic Forum is going on, and our CEO Satya Nadella, he's there at that forum, and talking more about AI governance globally. And we mentioned ChatGPT. It kind of pushed everything into the mainstream. People started thinking more about AI when they saw what ChatGPT could do, and then there was hope of how this technology can do all these great things and surpass human capabilities. But there was also then people kind of freaked out a little bit and said, well, what about technology disruptions to democracy, and what about people losing their jobs to robotics and to AI? So whole geopolitics, politics kind of entered into the picture, and then people started thinking, well, AI is more than just a technology. People kind of got to where they're looking at it as a political and an economic weapon. And of course, China and the United States are kind of leading this race. So there's been a lot of calls for regulation across industries, even from industry all the way to the United Nations Secretary General.
Yeah.
People are saying, hey, we got to do something here. So the WEF, the World Economic Forum, is saying, hey, we want to take the reins of global governance of AI, and we want to, use this time in Davos to try to focus on guardrails and governance and guidelines. And it's exciting to work for Microsoft and see that they have a seat at that table and they're involved in that, because I really like the way Microsoft has approached it. And we'll talk about that a little bit, about the 6 core principles when we talk more about the micro level. But last year, the WEF actually launched an AI governance alliance. So they got industry leaders like Microsoft, governments, academic institutions, civil society organizations to really get together and kind of champion responsible global design. Because that's one of the problems, is there's just not regulations, especially from country to country. Things are just, it's almost like when technology first came out. And it's funny, when I was in my master's program, one of the papers that our economics professor had us do was talking about, what is the situation where, Microsoft got in trouble for this a lot in, oh, I'm forgetting what it is, but it was around basically whether or not they were a monopoly. That was what it
Oh
was.
yeah.
So is Microsoft a monopoly? And at the time, I didn't, of course, didn't work for Microsoft, and we're in small groups, and I'm saying no, they're not a monopoly because you got to have standards in technology. So people ask, technology started coming out and getting crazy, and people go, if there's no standards, and then somebody big like Microsoft steps in and starts trying to set standards, and they immediately say, well, you're a monopoly, you know. And
Yeah.
that's kind of where we're at now, is we're at a point to where there is no standards. And I'm glad to see WEF stepping up and actually trying to put some type of AI governance, across this, because that's where AI gets a little bit scary.
Mhm.
And you make a couple good points I wanted to emphasize. Um, One, we'll drop a link to Microsoft has at least one, maybe a couple sites that point to the security and the governance that they put in place for AI and how they're what they're following there. So I've seen some good information out on that. We'll make sure to drop that in our link when we post this. Two, just the speed at which Chat GPT came out and was kind of a funny thing, and then a oh crap thing became the billboard message, like you were talking about. It became that this is cool but scary, and we don't know what to do, and it became a driving factor, and like you said, kind of from a geopolitical standpoint, a way for either side or 10 sides to try to draw and push people into certain areas without really bringing anything meaty to the table. Which comes to your next point: when people are trying to do that, then it's like, well, they're trying to control this, and we won't trust them.
Right.
And then I love the callback to just at every stage in life. I'm sure the first time Henry Ford rolled a car out, people were like, "Oh, this is gonna be crazy. What are we gonna do? I want my horse. Everything's gonna change." And we figure it out. I mean, so Chat GPT and AI is going to be figured out. We've got smart people and people who are invested in doing this. And as a society, we'll come along once we start to see these frameworks and these bumpers in place for us to kind of to work within. So
I think it's exciting, and for someone who's been in industry for a lot of years, I've realized that, at this point in my life, that not only have I been constantly learning and adapting to change throughout my life, even at this point in my life, I'm still adapting to change, and trying to have that growth mindset to
yeah,
continue to take on what's happening out there. But I do like, when we talk about the micro level, I'll jump into that a little bit with Microsoft. I like the way they're approaching AI. I like the responsibility. So, of course, on that global platform, it's good for us to have a seat at that table and be able to, to drive, that governance and guardrails. But even at the micro level, Microsoft's not trying to say, it's like that old commercial and the easy button, so they're not trying to say AI is an easy button. And they're making sure that our customers are clearly understanding that this is not an easy button. But those six core principles, talk about fairness, so how might AI system allocate opportunities or information resources in ways that are fair to the humans that use it? Reliability and safety, how might the system function well for people across different use conditions and contexts, including ones that it was not even originally intended for?
right,
Privacy and security, designed to support privacy. That's one of the first things when we go out to customers. Your data is your data. We're not going to use your data for testing models. And, because customers really want their, again, if data is gold, this is my gold. And so,
right,
they want that privacy and security. And there's even the inclusiveness, component around those six principles. How might the system be designed to be inclusive of people of all abilities? Transparency. How might people misunderstand, misuse, or incorrectly estimate the capabilities of the system? I love that one. How might they, misunderstand or incorrectly estimate? Again, it is not an easy button. If your data is not solid, In fact, we even suggest to customers, you need to have an internal team that is monitoring that output from AI, that's looking and saying, I like, even with ChatGPT, I think you got the thumbs up, thumbs down. Did you like that response? What did you think about that response? Good,
Yeah.
bad? Because again, its knowledge is only to the data that it's pointed to. And that's a little scary when you think about the global level, is, if I skew my data, then what AI is telling me, and what we all think, well, if AI is the gospel, if AI is the truth, well, it really, you could easily mislead the truth, with the underlying data, and then people would have this super trust, for the output of AI, and go, well, anything it says must be true. And I've always been a big proponent of critical thinking. I think that's something that's missing. I don't even know if they teach it in college anymore. I had multiple classes of critical thinking in my undergrad and in grad school, and I think it's one of the most important things. And when we talk about AI, we need to come to it with critical thought. Is it really giving me the right answer? Is this something that I want to believe, or should I look at the other side? Should I do some research? Instead of just being a lazy human and saying, oh, it told me that that was true, so I just believe that it's true. So I think we have to always approach things in life and in technology with a little bit of critical thinking. And then
It's a
it,
tool. It's not gospel. Right? At the end of the day, it's a tool
correct.
that we should be using as strictly for what it is, a tool, not like, oh, I asked ChatGPT or Copilot or something, and then I just take that and move it on. I mean, you built it that way. So like Outlook, you can say, hey, write me an email to Savannah about this thing, and it writes the email. Then it says, what do you think? Do you want to send this? And I can say, yeah, it's okay, but I don't, I would never say this, and this phrase isn't right, and let me just tweak it a little bit, and then I can send it. So it's a tool that helped me take away some of the time I would spend maybe creating the bulk of an email or a campaign or whatever.
Yeah.
But then I still should take on the ownership of, like you said, not being a lazy human,
Right.
and making the final decision and sending the button.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's important. And one of that last core principle is accountability. How do we create oversight so that humans can be accountable, that are in control? So there has to be accountability there. But then again, that's why I like Microsoft's approach, because they're looking at AI and Copilot as your assistant. We talked about that when we got together in Denver a couple months ago, is it's really your assistant. It's not there to take your job. It's not there to replace you. It's there to assist you. It's there to make you better. And I think if you look at AI that way, one, it's a little less scary, but two, also realizing that, again, you have to have transparency, you have to use critical thinking, and you have to look at that and say, I love that Microsoft pops up what you're mentioning, and creating an email or content. It always says is, what do you think?
Yeah.
Is this good, or do you want to jump in there and do a little human intervention, and
Right.
maybe edit it? But if you remember, even on those emails that Copilot will create for you, you can even have it set to, what's the sentiment? Am I trying to get them engaged, or I try to get them involved? What sentiment do I ask AI to
Yeah.
draft that email in? So,
One of my favorite, I saw a demo, and I can't remember it. It's been a few months. It's back in the fall, online, and it was a demo of an AI chatbot talking to a couple of different people, and within the conversation, the chatbot was able to determine and make decisions on the tenor of the conversation. So was the person they were talking to serious? And if so, the chatbot kept a serious tone. Was the person they were talking to a little bit more laid back and conversational? That took on a conversational tone. So in the moment, it was regenerating its process to understand how it could proceed to become a better conversationalist, to connect with the person it was talking to, which is, again, fun, maybe scary to some, but also to me, I just love this kind of the aspect of that learning model and how it can adapt.
Yeah, that's really the part of the component of AI called, deep learning. So, that higher level would be machine learning. And machine learning is not scary at all, because, machine learning is algorithms. classification algorithms, regressive algorithms, framework, I mean, different algorithms that are looking at data. And when I looked at that component of AI, when I really looked at what makes up AI, because we call everything AI nowadays, but there's
Right.
major components of AI. And when you kind of dissect into that, again, less scary and more understandable. But then underneath machine learning, there's this concept of deep learning, which is artificial neural networks. And when you start thinking about neural networks in software, little scary, a little amazing, but still a little scary. And when you start
Yeah.
getting into deep learning, you get into kind of things that you're talking about. And for some people, you're like, well, that's a little scary because now AI
Right.
is thinking.
Yeah.
But
It
cognitive
becomes
learning has been
the
there for
fodder of
years.
a bad sci-fi movie. That's like
Right.
where the bots are taking over.
Yeah, exactly. Because you never know. I mean, it's just like if you think about a human with neural networks, how we respond to experiences, how we pick up on body language or sentiment, I mean, it's different for every human. So then you
Yeah.
wonder, how do I control AI? Is it going to become an independent thinker, and what path of thinking, independent thinking, does it go down?
Yep.
It's that's a little crazy.
Yeah. Any, I mean, we're kind of getting up on time, but anything you know of or can share? We've seen a lot of great. I just sat in on a tech talk this week that was for the supply chain, talking about inventory, natural language inventory inquiries. So again, back to what we were talking about, the ability to set up in Dynamics search engines that work off of natural language. So I can just say, how many white T-shirts do I have? Maybe I forgot the number. I don't know. Whatever. Just asking questions of the data. Anything new that's in preview that you can share that we might see in this AI space coming out for Dynamics?
Well, as and love the branding that Microsoft's using with Copilot, and Copilot's everywhere. It's in Dynamics, it's a modern workplace, it's in Teams, it's in the extensibility platform. I've used actually Copilot to create Power Apps and Power Pages because
Mm-hmm.
I'm not, I'm more of a business guy. I'm not a super technical guy, and so Copilot has really helped me be able to leverage things that would normally take a little bit of development work. But now with Copilot, I can get a lot of that created for me to get started. I mean, it doesn't necessarily at this point do an end to end for me. I can't just say, build me an app, for expecting trailers when they back up to the dock door. It's not going to, do everything end to end, but it's going to give me the shell and the components and the pieces.
Yeah.
So that Copilot piece, is awesome. And then when you talk about, some of the new stuff, and I just installed the latest release. I was .37 and now I'm on .38, which is the latest release of Dynamics Finance and Supply Chain. Now you have, and right now they're sort of branding it Sidecar. You have that ability to have that almost like a chat GPT interface, but that Copilot assistant sitting there in every business app in Dynamics to say, let me ask you a question about the data. And so that was something that we knew was coming back when we talked in Denver, and I think it was in November. But we knew it was coming, but now we've got it in the release, and that's very exciting. I mean, that's one capability to me that just having that AI assistant or that co-pilot right there to assist you to bring back that information quickly. And now I
Yeah.
think the early stages is it may be just inventory. There's a little bit to installing that. One of the things that Microsoft has done, not only with some of the AI capabilities, but they're also doing it in supply chain, like the inventory visibility service and the new demand planning SKU for forecasting. They're kind of starting it in the extensibility platform. They're starting it there, but they're kind of connecting it to Dynamics. And
Yeah.
we started doing this. One of the major things that we did the last few years from a supply chain standpoint was planning optimization, because running MRP or running master planning, people had to do it at night or they had to do it on weekends. If they had a lot of data, they couldn't run it in office hours. So even
Yeah.
though we would boast, hey, you can do what if scenarios, and you're like, well, I guess I'll be doing those what if scenarios on the weekends because I can't run it during the day.
Right.
But now that they've made that a a cloud service, you can run it during office hours and you don't get, that kind of performance drag on your existing users. So they started doing a lot of things like, again, the inventory visibility service and the demand planning, which are very exciting stuff. I've been working with the demand planning now for a few weeks, and running that integration with the import and export jobs, so I can take data from Dynamics, into the demand planning capability, be able to massage that data, transfer that data, run calculations on that data, do forecast profiles, be able to merge forecast data. So just really being able to really do everything you could think from a forecasting standpoint. And when I'm happy and I've got consensus, even got a Teams link there for collaboration. And when I'm happy and got consensus on that forecast, then I export it out of the demand planning capability back into Dynamics. And now I'm ready to authorize that forecast and be able to run master planning. So I think that's one of the really cool features. And I'm going to speak about that feature and demonstrate that at Dynamics Con in May. So very excited about that. But I think the latest thing, with the Copilot really is that sidecar, or that ability to be able to ask questions about that business data. But again, Copilot's everywhere. It's even in Business Central. So we have a lot of customers. I was talking to one yesterday that probably isn't at a level they should be running, Dynamics, finance and supply chain, but they're, a great footprint for Business Central, and Copilot there as well. And I mean, it's in field service, it's in customer service, it's in, customer insights, is a big Copilot feature or AI feature, insights and journeys with the customer, field service, project operations, pretty much everywhere. And again, it's in Teams, which it'll give you that summary of a meeting after you get out, give you kind of, which, a lot of people might like is Cliff Notes. So I don't want to go back and watch the whole meeting. Give me the summary, Copilot, give me the Cliff Notes, if you will, of what went on in that meeting and what was important and what was said and the topics that were covered. And
I do this after every meeting. I like to do a bulleted, if it's a meeting where there's action items, I like to do a bulleted recap for my own purposes to edify my own, if I need to go back and find quickly the information. So it's a huge time savings for me. It's like, I don't have to go back and do this. I can say, give me the bullet points, and it also makes you think about too, when you're in the meeting, you can actually kind of pre-prompt and make Copilot even smarter by saying, this is an action item for Anthony. And then that's easier for Copilot to pick up the action items too. It's like, action item for Anthony, do this. And then Copilot it just quickly can, make that assumption and jump to it, for sure.
Yeah, and I tell everybody, when we talk about new stuff, this is one thing that has always been interesting for me, because, even in the older days, IT would often hide some new capabilities. They would go, well, we're not using that, so I'm just going to hide that from the screen. So that means the user never knows that there's new stuff coming out that they could leverage, or maybe there's a piece of the software that they're not using because they don't know it exists. So one of the things that I, told folks at the last user group, and I tell customers all the time, is go to releaseplans.microsoft.com, and you'll be able to see what's recently come out, what's coming out in the future, when the public preview date is, when the general availability date is. You can go and see those things. And as a company, and especially if you're a business analyst, you should be looking at those new features and what's coming out and say, how can my company leverage this? How can we take advantage of this? And be able to put initiatives in place to take advantage of what's new and what's coming out.
It's great too, because you can share those. I also evangelize that in a session I do, because you can save your plans, you can export them, send them to people. It really is interactive and creates. I mean, if you're an administrator in your organization, you should have that as a constant tick to look at and keep in touch with. So if you see something coming down the pike, you can say, hey, Anthony, they've got some really cool supply chain advancements coming up in the next release or 2 releases from now, or it's in preview. We should be looking at this and figuring out how it can replace maybe a manual process. You point out earlier, like, just to put some spin on it, at Uray, we were an apparel company doing decorated sportswear, and screen printing requires you to create X number of screens, 10 screens, whatever it is. And if you've got jobs queued up in the system, it's, for similar, the same design on multiple garments. And if you don't know that in planning, you might go ahead, burn those screens, plan a job, print it, reclaim those screens, and then next day the same job comes up. You've lost efficiency because you've gotten rid of those screens,
right.
And you have to go through the same process again. And this happened a lot. And I built in, this is back in years ago before there was something in the system.
The olden days.
So I built them some ability to look in our system and say, hey, don't plan this quite yet because you've got some stuff just days away from ready to production. Let it all queue up and then produce it, because you're going to be able to do them all at once, create some efficiency. And so those are, you pointed out some really great advancements and in the software. And then the sidecar, like you said, just right there next to you at every turn, prompting you for, not just there as a eye candy, but prompting you to use it and to help. Really good insight.
Yeah. Yeah, it's exciting, the stuff that Microsoft's doing. That's one of the reasons why, I stay, is because, I mean, there might be things here and there that you go, oh, because every company you work for might have things that are dragging on you, but when you look at the technology and you look at the platform and you look at what Microsoft is doing and how they're leading in so many areas, it's exciting and it's fun to be a part of. And so, that keeps me here. That constant learning, that new technology, that new capability, that leading in the market stuff, to me is exciting. And that really keeps me engaged. Even after all these years of doing I'm like super excited and very engaged with Microsoft.
Yep. Well, that passion comes through for sure. And I'm right there with you. Like, I do things because I'm passionate about it. And as long as that passion's still stoked, it's fun.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, Bobby, do you have any other talking points that you want to hit before we kind of close out this episode?
No, really appreciate having you on, Anthony. Look forward to seeing you soon in Denver. Do you think you'll make our next meeting? We're having a local meeting. I pinged you about it and sent you the information, but you're obviously welcome to come down. And know you're not speaking, but we'll be at Toastmasters. They're an AX customer, and it should be a fun event.
Yeah, I did Dale Carnegie years ago, which was similar to Toastmasters back when I would still turn beet red when I had to get up in front of people and talk. And it really helped me. And I've even read a few Carnegie books, and I have a lot of respect for him, but have a lot of respect for Toastmasters as well. So I'll try to get down there. I'll see what my schedule looks like. But
if you're free, definitely join us. Yeah. I don't think we all have to give speeches, which is good. But like you said, we just talked about this yesterday or 2 days ago with Savannah. It's like I failed my 10th grade speech class because I could not get up in front of the class. I just refused. I would get to the point of giving the speech and I would just, I can't do it. I'm, too embarrassed. Just can't do it. Moving past that through the years. So
it's a skill that, like I say, it's like anything in life. If you're a little afraid of it, jump into it. And even we could say that about technology, because there's companies sometimes that are a little afraid of that technology. Hey, just go ahead and walk into it and figure it out. And the more you walk into it, the more comfortable you'll feel. And then you won't get nervous. And like me speaking, I won't turn red. I mean, I could feel it when I used to stand up. It's like my whole face would feel flushed, and I'd look at the mirror. Start sweating and everything. So now I've got to my wife says I basically talk for a living. She thinks that's what I do. And I'm like, okay. And she's probably hearing me this morning and saying, see, I told you, you just talk for a living. More than that.
Yes. Yeah. You've brought some great insight to this podcast. I think that's some great advice to kind of end this out on. So thank you again for joining us. We really appreciate it. Until next time.
Magic number, happy number 20.
Yes. Yeah. Very special.
Cool. Thanks again, Anthony. We really appreciate you.
Thank you.